Hello, friends of Voices of History. Today we will talk about a mysterious people who rode through Europe in the times of the Roman Empire. They made a place for themselves in Hispania, and finished the ride in the lands of the Mauritania Tingitana in North Africa.
Right. Ready for a deep dive, because today we're going after a group you guys requested, the Alans. They pop up in history here and there, right? Often mentioned with, like, Goths, the Vandals, but they're kind of a mystery.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, they don't fit that mold, right? When we think like barbarians, we're thinking like deep forests of Germany, right? The Alans are way out east, roaming around between the Caspian and Black Seas, like the steppes.
Steppes? So not exactly, charging through forests then. What was their thing?
So picture this. Vast grasslands, herds of horses. Their whole identity was built around horsemanship. These were nomadic people, speakers of an Iranian language, and they were all about that warrior lifestyle. Dying in bed, that was like the worst thing imaginable for these guys.
Okay, so we're talking like hardcore horseback warriors. I'm already picturing a movie. But how did this translate into, them interacting with the rest of the world at that time?
Well, they definitely made an impression. Like Roman writers, they often wrote about the Alans with this mix of fear and also fascination. They described them as tall, often blonde or red-haired, and just fierce in battle. They were like the the classic image of the barbarian threat, at least from that Roman perspective.
And this alanos.txt source you dug up, it really plays that up, talking about their armor, the lances. They sound like you don't want to mess with these guys.
Oh, they were a force to be reckoned with, for a while anyway, unlike the Huns, who we'll talk about. The Alans, they were all about heavy cavalry. So these weren't, quick hit-and-run guys. They met their enemies head-on, fully armored, wielding those long lances you mentioned. It was very effective until, the Huns came along.
Okay, so the Huns, even I know those guys were a big deal. What made them so different, and how did they change the game for the Alans?
So imagine this. It's the late 4th century CE, and suddenly this new power bursts onto the scene, right? The Huns. And they were a completely different kind of enemy. Fast, masters of mounted archery, experts at hit-and-run tactics. They just totally disrupted everything. For the Alans, who were used to, facing their opponents on a fairly even playing field, it was a huge shock.
So the Alans, used to their heavy cavalry charges, are suddenly dealing with these, incredibly mobile archers. What did they do? I'm guessing they didn't just, give up.
They didn't, but the Huns' arrival, that was a turning point. It shattered Alan unity, sent groups fleeing in different directions. This is where their story splits, and it gets really interesting.
Ooh, I love where this is going. So where did these different Alan groups end up, and what kind of impact did they have? Did they try to fight the Huns head on, or did they adapt their tactics?
Well, one group, they allied with the Vandals, who, by the way, were another Germanic group also on the move because of the Huns, and decided to make a really daring move.
Daring? I bet it was. Tell me more. What did they do?
Picture this. It's December 31st, 406 CE, freezing cold. This Alan group, along with the Vandals and another group called the Sueves, decide to cross the Rhine River into Roman territory. But here's the thing. The river. It was frozen solid.
A frozen river as a bridge for a mass migration. Talk about a wild New Year's Eve. But this is just one group of Alans, right? What about those who didn't head west?
Right. The story definitely doesn't end there. And this is where we get to those really interesting different paths, like you were saying. Another large group of Alans, led by a guy named Gore, they made a totally different choice. They actually became Roman allies.
Whoa, okay, that's a twist. So now we've got different parts of the same people ending up on opposite sides of this huge moment in history. It really makes you think about the choices people were forced to make back then in those times, right?
Yeah, exactly. It shows just how complicated the whole situation was. Think about it. Having to choose between fighting alongside, your own people, even if it meant going against a powerful empire like Rome, or siding with that very same empire to try to protect your own people, just wild. Really shows those alliances, those loyalties constantly shifting, in that period.
Mind-blowing. Okay, so we've got one group crossing a frozen river into Roman Gaul, another bunch joining forces with Rome against the Huns. Where do we even go from here?
Well, let's follow those Alanusa who went into Roman Hispania, modern-day Spain. And this is where it gets even more interesting. They weren't just there for a quick raid or something. They were trying to settle down. In fact, one of their kings, a leader named Atasis, he even set up his capital in the Roman city of Emerita Augusta, which today is Merida.
Hold on, nomadic warriors, used to those wide-open steppes, suddenly setting up shop in a Roman city. That's not what I expected. So did they try to like blend in, adopt the Roman ways, or did they rule as these, outsiders?
That is the million-dollar question, right? It's something that's puzzled historians for a long time. You'd think with a takeover like that, there'd be all sorts of obvious Allen stuff in the archaeology, right? But here's the thing. Even though they controlled a big chunk of territory for a good while, they left a really surprisingly small footprint.
So no big palaces, no statues of Allen kings, riding into battle, no obvious signs of their culture. That's strange.
Exactly. And that lack of clear evidence is what makes their time in Hispania so fascinating to think about. It suggests that even though they had, political power, military might, they held on to their own distinct identity.
So they were in this Roman city, but not really of it. It's like they were stuck between these two worlds.
Yeah.
That nomadic past and this new Roman urban life.
And that tension, that's what makes them so interesting to study. We see little hints of cultural exchange, like maybe the origins of the Alano dog breed, but no real, large-scale blending. Why not? Was it a choice? Were there obstacles? It's like a puzzle with missing pieces.
Talk about a historical mystery. Makes you wonder, are there other ghost peoples out there, groups that had a big impact, but somehow we barely even know about them?
Totally possible. History's full of these gaps, these forgotten stories. But let's get back to the Allens. Their time in Hispania, as interesting as it is, it wasn't going to last. They eventually came up against a new threat, the Visigoths.
Oh no, not another group. Things were already a mess. Who were these guys and, what happened?
The Visigoths were another Germanic group, and like those others we've talked about, on the move, looking for a new home in the, increasingly fragile Roman Empire. And unfortunately for the Alans, they were tough opponents, very formidable.
So the Alans, after holding their own in Hispania, finally met their match. What happened next?
Well, the Visigoths defeated the Alans, and that really shifted the power dynamic. Now, remember those Vandals, the ones who crossed the Rhine with that first group of Alans? Well, a lot of the defeated Alans went to them for refuge, and that created a powerful new alliance, the Vandal-Alan Confederation.
Ah, so they joined forces. It's like a historical team-up. What did this new Vandal-Alan alliance do next?
Well, they were about to become a force that would shake the Roman world to its core. Together, they didn't just want a small piece of the former empire. They set their sights on a much bigger prize, North Africa.
North Africa. Wow, big jump. And I think I know where this is going. They didn't stop there, did they? You got it.
Yeah.
In 455 CE, this Vandal-Alan alliance, they pulled off the unthinkable. Sacked Rome, the heart of what was once the mighty Roman Empire. It's kind of wild to think, right? A group that started way out on the steppes of Asia ends up playing a part in bringing down Rome.
It really is remarkable when you think about it. But, and this is where things get interesting, after that huge victory, the Alans, as their own distinct group, they start to fade from the history books.
Wait, so they conquer North Africa, they sack Rome, and then they just disappear. What happened? Did they just blend in with the Vandals?
Yeah, in a way. It's something you see a lot in history. Conquering groups, even those with really strong identities, they get absorbed into the larger populations they conquer. Seems like that's what happened with the Alans in North Africa. Mm-hmm. They were part of the Vandal kingdom, but their culture, their language, their customs, they gradually faded over time.
So their story basically becomes part of the Vandal story.
Yeah.
What about those Alans who stayed east, back with the Huns? Did they meet a similar fate?
Not quite. We don't have the full picture, but we know some Alan groups went east with the Huns. Over time, these Alans ended up settling in the Caucasus region, which is that mountainous area between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. And this is where their story takes a really fascinating turn.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What happened to these Eastern Alans? Did they manage to hold on to their identity, unlike those who went west?
In a way, yeah. These Eastern Alans, over centuries, they became the ancestors of a modern-day group, the Ossetians. And get this. Their language, Ossetian, is thought to be the last surviving branch of the languages spoken by the Alans and their Sarmatian relatives.
Wow, that's incredible. A living link to the language of those ancient horsemen. It's like a message from the past.
Exactly. It really shows the power of language, Empires fall, cultures change, but those echoes of the past, they can stick around in surprising ways. The Ossetians, with their language, they carry on a piece of that Alan legacy.
Amazing to think about, right?
Yeah.
All these different stories, these threads woven through history, migrations, battles, cultural exchange, even a language surviving against all odds. Quite a journey.
Yeah, it shows how complex and interesting history really is. We've only scratched the surface, too. There's always more to discover, more to learn about the Alans and all those other groups that helped shape the world we live in.
It makes you think, how much don't we know? How many stories are still out there waiting to be found? But before we go, let's leave our listeners with something to think about. We talked about how adaptable the Alans were, right? Shifting from heavy cavalry to lighter tactics when they encountered the Huns, it helped them survive and even thrive in a world that was changing all around them. Where else do we see that need for adaptation today? What can the Alans teach us about navigating, the challenges and opportunities of a world that's constantly evolving?
The lessons of the past, they often have a surprising amount to say about the present. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, keep diving deep into those mysteries. Until next time.
A short story that invites us to continue exploring the mysteries of the past and investigate the events that happened. Feel free to share this video with your friends and family. Subscribe to the channel for more history content. Leave a comment with your thoughts on this topic and let us know what other episodes of the story you'd like us to cover in future videos, and if you'd like us to delve deeper into certain topics, extending our content on them. A greeting and even another adventure of voices from history.